if it sounds like Trayvon Walker is going to be the top pick. He was a guy I thought they could probably get it with 16 back when they had that, but he's flown up. So he's probably gone. Aiden Hutchinson's probably gone. Where do the next guys go? Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know where he goes. And then you have Jermaine Johnson. If one of those guys slips down, I think Jermaine Johnson's probably a better culture fit.
It's the biggest, most important draft in the history of this Philadelphia football franchise. The JAKIB Media Sports 2022 NFL Draft Special. Live on 6abc.com from the Ocean Casino and Resort in Atlantic City. Presented by First Trust Bank, the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. IBEW Local 98, Stateside Vodka, United Healthcare, Mesa Law, 6ABC, and Budweiser, the official beer of the Philly sports fan.
Man,
I know somebody you miss dearly, seeing every single day, and I'm going to bring him up right now because I know how you're longing for your buddy.
I don't even like the guy.
There he is, DZ Holla. That's the man himself right there, Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports Philadelphia. What's up, Dave?
Look at you guys. I mean, Gunner learned how to use a computer.
No, exactly.
No. Someone showed him how to turn it on or turned it on for him, Dave. Okay.
This is impressive.
Yes. I'm going to ask you the same question, man. So we get to this point, and look, you do it for a living, man. You are knee deep in Eagles content constantly, but we're 2 days away from the draft. Let's pull the curtains. How exhausted are you of doing mocks and doing they may get this, they may take this. How excited are you going to be when this finally happens on Thursday?
Yeah, I really love the actual draft. And I like when we start finding out who's actually going to be on the team.
Right.
I'm at that point now too, where it's all right, like let's get there. And you have to remember, like, a couple days, like, we're not learning anything about the draft right now.
No.
We're learning about what people want to be out there about the draft right now. And a lot of that is, misdirection. And I do enjoy the process of learning about the prospects. Like, I like all that. And that really starts with just watching college football, right? We all watch it every Saturday, and we start like putting, a name
in the vault,
in the back of our minds. And then, but then really you start to get into the process. You learn about the prospects. I like all that. But at this point, it's like, all right, we get the names, and we're talking about the same names for the most part. Cause we end up spending so much time on the first round that, there's 6 more rounds after that really matter. And so I enjoy, like, once we get into the draft and once the players start having homes, then I really like it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Dave, when you sit down and compile your mock drafts, is it just on a feel, or do you look at all the other mock drafts out there, weigh the pros and cons of what other people are saying in terms of why this guy would be a decent fit in Philadelphia, or is what you do based on your feel and your knowledge of how this team functions?
Well, when we're talking about the Eagles, I feel like I'm like, all right, I at least know the types of players. And it was a little trickier last year, and it's still tricky to some extent with a relatively new coaching staff trying to figure out exactly how those players will be used. But I feel like I have a good sense of at least some of the types of players the Eagles will want. Mm-hmm. When you start looking around the league, it's a little trickier. And it's funny because every team says they don't draft for need. And then the first place we all go with our mock drafts is for need. Mm-hmm. And I think that's natural. But I also think, like, teams are lying to us too. I mean, pure best player available is very rare.
Right.
Very rare, because it's best player available with the caveat that they do need certain positions and they value certain positions over others. Like, we know with this team, right? What do they value? They value the trenches. And if there ends up being like 2 prospects that they think are similar, which way are they going? Well, they're going to the trenches. Or and those the way teams value positions changes over the years. But what's been a constant with this team? Linebackers. They haven't valued them as much. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those things, it's helpful to know. And that's why it's not just best player available. I mean, if the linebacker is the best player available, but they have a defensive end who's right there with them, guess who they're taking? I mean, it's not like there's any big secret about that.
Dave, let me ask you just your sense of this thing, your vibe, your spidey sense of knowing the Eagles and how this may shake out. They're sitting there at 15 and 18. Do we see aggressive Howie, which he generally is, and that already started by trading away one of the first rounders, or because it's so deep at defensive line, at potentially receiver, at some of the positions of need, he's sitting there saying, go ahead, just take those quarterbacks in front of us, fellas, and I'm going to let this come right to me, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope if you're the Eagles, is that the quarterbacks start going, offensive tackles start going, because those are the two spots that are premium positions, and they're positions the Eagles value, but they're not positions we think the Eagles are going to go after in the first round this year. So, yeah, by all means, yeah, he's watching going, yeah, Malik Willis is great. Go take that kid. Start the run on quarterbacks, start the run on offensive tackles. It will then push some good defensive players, some good receivers down into their range. I think he'll be aggressive if, my guess, they have a very short list of players that they're thinking, if these guys start to slip into our range, we're going to pounce. Very much like they did last year with Devontae Smith when they moved up 2 spots. They gave up a 3rd-round pick to move from 12 to 10 to draft him. I think that's a similar type of trade we could see this year. And look, I also think it's possible they trade out of 18. Because you have to look at it this way. If they don't love the value of the area where they're picking at 15, well, they're picking at 18 too. So if they're looking at it like, we want to get up here to get one of these premium guys, whoever it is, whether it's one of the edge players that slips there, one of the top cornerbacks if he's there, maybe Kyle Hamilton, maybe they'll really buck the trend and go after maybe the safest and the best player in the draft, a lot of people think. Maybe they'll do something like that. If they slide up out of 15 because they don't like the value of 15, 18, then it stands to reason that they would then try to get out of 18 and get back to try to recoup some of what they gave to move up earlier in the round. Now, the problem is they can kind of dictate the trade up a little bit. They can make the phone call and say, hey, we have this deal worked out. We're ready to pull the trigger. We want to move up. If the phone's not ringing on the back end of it, then they might be stuck there at 18.
Hey, Dave, a short while ago, we had our colleague on, all of us, Jeff McClain, and I'll ask you the question, one of the questions we asked him. Do you think Howie has learned his lesson in terms of listening more to the people on the outside who feeds him information about certain players and certain fits for the structure of the team moving forward?
It's a very valid question. I think maybe a little bit. I think last year might have shown that a tad. They kind of bucked some traditional things they've done in recent years, and it took some bigger school guys who had a history, and it felt like a lot of Andy Weidel influence on last year's draft. With that said, who knows? This could be Andy Weidel's last year here.
Right.
He's a candidate for that job in Pittsburgh, and that will be a big loss. It's always tough to tell exactly. Ultimately, it's on Howie, right? He's the GM. He gets the credit. He gets the blame. It falls on him. But it is tough to know exactly, if you're looking at the pie chart, what percentage is his evaluation? How much is he listening to the scouts? How much is he listening to the coaches who do have a role in this as well? Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's Howie's decision. But as much as it pains me to say it, because I hate the word, it is a collaborative process. Now, how much of that collaboration is equal? I think that varies from year to year, from prospect to prospect, even. I mean, we know Tom Donahoe is one of the more respected people in that building. He wasn't very happy with their 3rd-round pick last year and the way that unfolded. What I can tell you is there were other people in the building who loved that pick. Yeah. So did Howie listen to other people on that pick? We can look at Tom Donahoe and say, well, no, because this guy's pretty PO'd, right? But there were also a lot of people. You saw Jonathan Gannon in the same clip, like really pumped up about it. So it's really tough to nail down exactly how much is coming from each place. I do think he listens, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's his reputation on the line, you know? And so like it or not, he's the one who has to make the final call.
Dave, let me ask you, I know you wrote about this, last week, I think it was. There are a lot of players that are projected to be high picks who are coming off really major injuries, right? And the Eagles have been down this road in the past, and in some instances, it's worked. Landon Dickerson, I know it's only been 1 year. Some it hasn't, Sidney Jones. But you're looking at Jamison Williams and Drake London, among others, guys on the defensive side too. How do they view that? I mean, where does that stand with them organizationally? Are they willing to take that risk? Do you think if Jamison Williams is there, they'd grab him at 15?
They really do listen to their medical people here. And a few years ago, they got burned by it. They had DK Metcalf off their board. And look, they weren't the only team that year. It was a back injury, and it's an area where you have to be concerned. Hadn't hurt him too much. I mean, he's been a good and healthy player in the league. I look back at the Sidney Jones pick. I still like that pick. Obviously, it didn't work out. And in hindsight, you say, oh, what were they thinking? I thought they got great value with Sidney Jones at 43, a guy who was a clear first-round pick, probably a top 15 pick if he doesn't get hurt. It's a tricky thing to figure out, and it really does vary case to case. And Howie gave actually a little bit of actual insight last week when he was asked about it. He said, you know, from our process, we've learned that the more time we have to research an injury to find out about the recovery process, the better it is for us. So you look at, to me, I look at some of the big examples like you gave. Jamison Williams, he's been hurt for a while now. He's pretty far into his rehab process. He got hurt in the national championship game. So there's more information about that. Whereas a guy like David Ojabo, who got hurt at his pro day, similar to Sidney Jones, right? There's less time, and we haven't really seen him get far into that rehab process. So I think if you kind of read between the lines there, it can tell you what they're thinking. I wouldn't hesitate at all to take Jamison Williams at 15 if he's there. I don't think he'll be.
I'd be surprised.
So sure. I don't think he'll be there.
Yeah, that's wishful thinking, but I was just giving you an example. Yeah.
Yeah, but if he's there at 15, I think the value is worth it, and there is risk involved. Honestly, I look back at it, and I think about Sidney Jones, and I think about Landon Dickerson. At the time when they made both of those picks, I liked the Sidney one more than I liked the Landon Dickerson one. And maybe my thinking has changed over the years because of the position and the Achilles. That probably doesn't mesh well. But at the time, I was looking at it like, well, Sidney Jones, this is like a kind of a freak injury, whereas Landon Dickerson, I wasn't too worried about just, and we'll see. It's still so early in his career. It looks good now, and we'll see in 5 years. But I wasn't so worried about the ACL as I was about all the injuries.
Yeah, he had 4 or 5 in college. He couldn't finish a season.
Yeah, he had a lot. So we'll see how that plays out. It certainly looks good now, but that was my thinking then, was like, well, Sidney's a one-time deal. If he can recover from this injury, they got a first-round pick. Whereas when they took Landon, I'm thinking, man, I don't know if this kid can hold up. He hasn't even held up in college. Can he do that in the pros? And so far, he's proven me wrong with that. I hope he continues to, because he's fun to watch. But yeah, it's funny how – but you also – so maybe the Eagles were thinking something similar. You have to be careful with being too reactive to an individual circumstance. You look at Sidney Jones and you think, man, they misread the injury, and that's the reason he hasn't been a good player in the NFL, or he was a failed pick. Is that the only reason he was a failed pick here? I don't know. It's hard to get in your time machine and say he's not hurt. Does he still have a great NFL career? I know his confidence was an issue here, and maybe he doesn't have that issue if he's never hurt, but maybe he does. And maybe we're talking about him still as a disappointing draft pick if he hadn't gotten hurt. So I think you have to kind of guard against being too reactive and completely changing your thinking, because you have to try to find the causation here. It's not just about this guy got hurt, he wasn't a good player here, and it was because of that injury. And we have to now not take anyone who has that injury in that time frame, because it's not going to work, because every guy's different. Every situation's different. And that's kind of the pretzel these guys can twist themselves into during this whole process.
So Dave, give me your top 3 picks and position wise in chronological order that you think the Eagles need to go in?
Yeah, I think I'll cheat a little bit here, and I'll say they need secondary. Mm-hmm. They need edge help, probably a defensive end, not someone in that Sam spot. And then I still think they need a receiver. I don't think they can go into the season with what they have at that position. The Zach Pascal deal doesn't bother you if they find another legitimate weapon.
Yes.
But those are the positions. Now, right now, like positions of need, you kind of, if you're looking at immediate positions of need, cornerback and safety are pretty obvious. They don't have starting roles filled there. They have 2 starting jobs open in their secondary. Defensive end to me is kind of a longer term need. Like, yes, they can get through this season, I guess, with what they have. But as much as we all love Brandon Graham, he's in his 30s, coming off an Achilles. Mm-hmm. You don't really know what you're going to get from him. You have Josh Sweat, who is, yes, a good player, probably still ascending. Was technically a Pro Bowler last year, but not a star. Mm-hmm. You have Derek Barnett, who, yeah, if he's a rotational guy, fine. But you can't really count on him to be. So all of it, like, you need defensive ends. So they have quite a few positions of need as they enter. It's funny, linebacker, I wouldn't put in the top 4. Yeah. Maybe not in the top 5, which is a crazy thing when we're talking about the Eagles and what we've seen over the last decade, but they have other more pressing needs.
So I'm glad you put it in that chronological order, because I've said for the last couple of weeks now that there's so much depth at the wide receiver and the DN position that if they held pat and stayed where they were, there's enough wealth of talent there that they're going to get a quality player at those positions. If they do desire that cornerback, I think the cornerback position is a little bit thinner. They're going to have to make a move somehow. Do you think Howie would get the twitch? If they deem cornerback their number 1 priority, do you think Howie's willing to twitch just enough to try to move up in that top 12, top 11, top 12 spot to get one of those top maybe 3 or 4 corners that are out there on the board?
I think the trade-up guys, to me at least, are Sauce Gardner and Stingley, Derek Stingley.
Okay.
And Sauce is the cleanest one.
Yeah.
And Stingley, there are questions, legitimate questions. He's had 1 year of high play of productive football, and it was, his rookie
freshman
season.
Year. Yeah, freshman year.
Freshman year in 2019. So legitimate questions, but the talent there is enough to trade up for. After that, I wouldn't trade up for a corner. I wouldn't trade up for Trent McDuffie. I wouldn't. I really, and honestly, I like Andrew Booth from Clemson more than Trent McDuffie. I wouldn't trade up for either of them. If you're looking at trade up candidates, I think those top 2 corners definitely fit the bill. I think Kyle Hamilton is a trade up candidate if he starts to slide later in the top 10, which I know would be a huge departure for them. They've never in their franchise history drafted a safety in the first round. I get that would be a big departure, but I think he's a special enough player to make that work. And then the edge players. I think if it sounds like Trayvon Walker is going to be the top pick, he was a guy I thought they could probably get it at 16 back when they had that, but he's flown up. So he's probably gone. Aiden Hutchinson's probably gone. Where do the next guys go? Kayvon Thibodeau? I don't know where he goes. And then you have Jermaine Johnson. If one of those guys slips down, I think Jermaine Johnson's probably a better culture fit for them. We know that I think that would be a decent trade-up option. And then the one I don't know how to think about is Jordan Davis.
Yep.
I don't think he'll be there at 15. It's hard for me to imagine him getting past the Ravens. I don't know what that. He's just he's the toughest guy in this draft to talk about, because what is he? He's a run stuffer with pass rush upside. How much can he play in a game? He was averaging 23 snaps a game at Georgia, but those Georgia defenders were all so good, but they all the problem with that team now that we're in the scouting process is that they all had such defined roles. I mean, Walker was asked to set the edge. I mean, he wasn't really. So now you're trying to project with a lot of these Georgia guys because they're rotating. They have such a talented defense. And now you're trying to figure out, well, what can they do I don't want to say a less talented defense, but where you're asked to do more. Maybe it is a less. Gosh, there are less talented defenses in the NFL than what Georgia had.
Well, you know what it's like, guys? It's like trying to project Kentucky players coming out in the NBA sometimes. Like guys who came up, like Devin Booker was, like a seed when he came out and he bloomed. Like that happens a lot. I don't know if, it's necessarily directly applicable, but that's the thing, Dave, when it comes to Davis. You did bring back Fletcher Cox. You do have Hargrave still there. And I know like Fletcher Cox is not long-term, but do they view that as there's such potential there that we grab him rather than an edge guy? These are the fascinating thoughts that you wonder about.
Yeah, in that case, I think it really would be best player. Like if you're sitting there and without a trade up and you're at 15 and it's, if it's Jordan Davis or George Karlaftis, who's really become a divisive name in this pre-draft process. Yeah. Then you take the better player, and it's probably Jordan Davis. Right. I don't think you can overdraft at a position when they're relatively important, both of them, right? Like they value the defensive tackle and defensive end position pretty similarly. I think, I don't think they would make a big leap ahead of one position for the other just because of the position. I think it really would be at that point, hey, whoever's higher on the board, go get them.
Hey, is it in the Eagles' best interest to take a flyer on a running back, let's say in the middle rounds? I mean, this is a big year for Miles Sanders. We don't know what they really think about him long-term. Boston Scott, we don't know what they think about him year to year. Is it in their best interest to pursue another young running back, maybe to fill a gap? If not in 2022, definitely after this year.
Yeah, I believe in drafting mid-round running backs.
Right.
Because I think you can get productive years out of them without paying them anything. It's the tricky thing with Miles this year. I don't think anyone questions he's talented. He's got to stay healthy.
Yep.
I mean, he's entering year 4 and he can't stay healthy. And I'm fine with him, never being the pass catching weapon we thought he was going to be as his rookie campaign showed us. Like, that's fine. He's a good runner. He can carry a team, but he can't stay healthy. And that paying that guy a lot of money on a long-term deal, it scares you a little bit. And I think that they would. I mean, I think if he gets off to a hot start this year, they'll offer him a contract, try to extend him. And if not, they'll let him hit the market after the year is over. But it's not a bad idea to bring in another running back because, look, Boston Scott's going to be unrestricted next year. Kenny Gainwell is a change of pace guy. He's not going to be a number 1 back. I don't think they drafted him to be a number 1 back. They drafted him to be kind of a change of pace receiver out of the backfield. So, yeah, if there's a mid-round guy they like, and I think there always are. There's always a running back, especially the way the league there's probably not going to be one in the first round this year. So, and look, I don't particularly love the class, but I think every year there are going to be running backs in the mid-rounds that you like. Damian Pierce from Florida. You get him for a 4th or a 5th round pick, plug him in. I'm fine with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Dave, I'll ask you a question that's usually applicable to Jalen Hurts, but I'm going to ask it about Nick Sirianni. Do we know what we have with him as a head coach?
Not yet. I think we have a good idea. I think he showed some signs. What do we know about him? Let's like go through the checklist, right?
Yeah.
We know his players love him. And that's I don't want to discount that.
Yeah,
that matters. It
huge.
Absolutely matters. And I'm thinking like back to this time last year when we're still kind of in the middle of the pandemic and a bunch of NFL teams were saying we're not, like the Players Association saying we're not going to any voluntary spring workouts. And it was his first year and he sat down with some of the leaders on the team and they figured out a compromise. He got him in there for some OTAs. They killed the mandatory minicamp. I thought that was his first win as a head coach, just figuring that out, being able and willing to sit down. And imagine Chip Kelly sitting down even his first year with the veteran leaders and figuring it out. No. So I think that's a big deal. Offensively, I don't really know what he wants his offense to be because he got forced out of it. So the one thing we know about him offensively is that he's at least willing to change. A lot of coaches last year, offensive coaches, would not have changed that drastically to fit what they figured out their team did best. or to hide their deficiencies. I give him credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
It has kind of clouded our knowledge of what he wants his offense to be because they were such a run-heavy team. I don't think he wants them to be that run-heavy.
Right.
I can tell you that much. I think he wants them to be a better passing offense, but I was impressed that he was willing to make that change. The last few coaches in here, and I don't want to knock either of them, they're both pretty good coaches, Chip Kelly and Doug Peterson, neither of them are doing that. They're not. They're not changing to be that heavy run because they realize that's what they did best. They're just not doing it. So I give him credit for that. After that, I think the other thing we have to figure out is how aggressive is he?
Yeah.
I think he probably skews to the conservative side more than Doug Peterson did. But he also needs better players around him for us to really get a read on that. Was his offense good enough last year to determine if he's a risk taker? I don't know. I mean, I think he had a young quarterback. He had deficient weapons at times. So I think a lot of times your aggressiveness is tempered by the personnel you have. Sometimes Doug Peterson didn't care, and it got him in trouble after 2017 because he wanted to be as aggressive as he was that year, and he didn't have the players to do it, and it showed after a while. So, I want to see him with another year and find out how he blends the analytics, how he blends his gut, and coming up with some of those decisions. I think we have a good sense of who he is, but I don't think we know completely yet.
Hey, David, you going out to Vegas, or are you going to be camped over at NovaCare for the draft?
I'll be at the NovaCare. No Vegas for me. I like it at the NovaCare during draft week.
Do you? The reason I ask you that, Rob, is this man travels the world by himself. One year he's in the mountains with the Dalai Lama. Next year he's riding on the back of crocodiles down the Amazon.
Really?
I lived when I worked with him. I lived vicariously through him because he did stuff I wouldn't do. I wouldn't go out of the country by myself. But Dave said, what the heck with this? I'm going to get to see places and do things that most people can only dream of. So if there's a man that likes to travel, it's this guy right here. That's why I thought he might take the trip to Vegas, take in some of the sights and sound, cover a little football, make a little extended weekend up.
Hey, give us some of the spots you've hit, man. Yeah, I'm dying to hear this.
Okay, yeah, well, it was funny. Like Gunner and I would post up and chat for a while, especially in the summer when there's not a ton going on. Yeah, so I have 2 times a year where I can actually travel. It's like February and July because it's the only dead time
before camp and after the Super Bowl. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's the only dead time in the season. So, I did a Peru trip a few years ago. It was fun. Spent some time in the did a Machu Picchu trek, and then I spent some time in the Amazon down there. I did a Uganda trip by myself a few years ago.
Jeez.
That was cool. Went up and I was in windy, impenetrable forests. Got to see some mountain gorillas. Yeah, so I've done some cool stuff. I was in Indonesia a couple years ago.
You thought I was kidding, Rob?
No, any of these ever get sketchy? I always have
That's
this.
What I want to ask.
Yeah, I always have this kind of and it's like nightmare. I guess it's worst case scenario where it all of a sudden I'm in a foreign land. I don't know who to go to. Did you ever have anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, you just have, and I don't know how sketchy it really is versus your mind playing tricks on you. I've had some close wildlife encounters that are, the gorillas were one. I was pretty close to the silverback, and it's a little sketchy. But it turned most of the people, most people are good. Yeah. It's you end up. You have to, when you travel by yourself, you do have to be on high alert a little bit more. Right. Your guard is always up. But yeah, you can make it work. I got to see some cool stuff.
What's the next trip?
Next trip, it's been really tough to figure out trips during COVID. Not that I can't travel places, but some of the countries are a little behind us in terms of where they are.
Yep.
So in order to avoid all that, I'm not leaving the country this summer.
Okay.
I'm actually going out to visit a buddy who lives in Washington State. So we're gonna
beautiful country.
It's great up there, and I haven't seen enough of it. So I don't know exactly what we're doing yet. Maybe some North Cascades National Park. Maybe we'll hop into British Columbia for a few days. So I'm excited for that.
So you've never gotten to a point where you said to yourself, it would be nice to have a companion just in case. What if you got sick? What if you got injured? You know what I mean?
I've traveled with people before.
Right.
I like it. It's just a different experience. When you're traveling by yourself, you can just do whatever you want, whenever you want. So you can just, I want to do this today, or I want to change plans. I don't have to then do something.
Sure.
Makes sense.
And if it like forces you out of your comfort zone a little bit too, it like forces you to meet people and kind of mingle with the locals, which is a big part of it.
So what's the strangest food that you've eaten on one of your trips?
There's a few. I did in Peru, I did guinea pig, which is like a kind of a touristy thing now, honestly. Okay. But I did that. I ate grasshoppers in Uganda from a street vendor.
Oh,
yeah. Honestly, not bad. Not bad. They weren't bad. They fried them up.
Is there anything you've done? Any food you're like, I'm good. I did it. I'm not going back. We're not going to revisit that.
I mean, I probably wouldn't eat the grasshoppers again. Just okay. I didn't like them that much.
All right.
Yeah.
I think Gunner's trying to get an invitation, Dave.
No, heck no.
Well, the one day Gunner brought in this jerky.
Oh, yeah.
You remember this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
He shared with someone. That's a big deal.
Whatever.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, he doesn't bring. Still not a rib in sight, but he brought in some
wings, ribs,
some tarantula jerky. Yeah.
Exactly.
You were there. Remember, there was 8 of us. I had this. Rob.
I did not eat it.
He wouldn't try to. He wouldn't try the tarantula. So I'm out in California visiting one of our nieces in Temecula, California, and it is unbelievable jerky store. It has shark jerky, camel jerky, and then there's a tarantula. And I'm thinking, how do you make jerky out of a tarantula? So I bought a few different kinds that I wanted to try.
Yeah.
And when we get back to the house, I noticed in the bag there's a can of tarantula jerky, and I'm like, I didn't buy this. Come to find out, my niece bought it and snuck it in my bag for me. So I brought it back home and brought it to the office one day.
Yeah.
And so people, as you might expect, there are people who are like, I'm not trying this. I'm not. There was about 8 people, including a couple of women, Maureen Quilter, another coworker of ours, who actually jumped, stepped up. And I was kind of disappointed because when you take it, tasted like nothing. Once you get past the concept that this is an oversized bug, dehydrated bug you're putting in your mouth, but there was no taste, no flavor whatsoever. So I was kind of disappointed. But I was impressed that people stepped up and said, I want a piece of this. I want a piece of that. The fact that you could divide a tarantula in 8 parts, to give people is amazing in itself. But like I said, I live vicariously through Dave. I have a daughter who traveled extensively like that. She went to 6 different Asian countries in 2 weeks one time. And then another time she was on a mission trip. She went to Greece, and then they ended up in Bulgaria. And, they were with the gypsy population there. And one of the meals they had was this soup made out of cow udder.
No, I'm good. Yeah. So, sounds like Dave would do it. He's adventurous. I'm not. I'm the opposite. So I do it. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. I'd be looking for a McDonald's. Dave, you're the best, man. We're looking forward to your coverage. You follow Dave at Zangaro NBCS. Of course, check out his podcast with our buddy Rube, Eagle Eye. You guys do a great job, man. Dave, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right.
All the best. Miss traveling with you, man.
Yeah, man. Dave's good people. All right, let's get a timeout here, Gunner. We come back. We'll continue with the Birds talk. We will get it back to the Sixers as well. And listen, let's get the strong comment section going. All right. We will take some of the best questions that we get posed regarding the draft, people. Sixers, world traveling, whatever. You throw it out there. Gunner, maybe some grilling questions, you name it. You will throw it out there. We'll take the best one. Smash that like button. He's Derrick Gunn. I'm Rob Ellis. You are watching Sports Take and listening to Sports Take, JAKIB Media.